video is all about the secret to creative solutions using a slightly alternative method called productive meditation. I've previously spoken about how walking in a relaxed state with an open mind can lead to creative insight and new ideas. If you like reading author interviews and author bios as much as I do, then you've probably noticed that there's a lot of writers out there who have made daily walks a part of their creative practice. Many writers use their daily walk as a way to work through plot holes or to come up with other creative solutions, or as a way to unstick any writing blocks. However, the walking practice I'm about to describe is slightly different. You may ordinarily take your walk and allow your mind to fall into a relaxed state. You may allow it to wander and to think freely. Now, studies have shown that this kind of walk can lead to really great insights. In fact, I have written a whole article on this, and the link is below. But the type of writing practice I'm about to describe is very different. Productive meditation is a style of walking where you go out for a walk with the intention of solving a creative problem by concentrating on it intensely. Now, I can't take credit for this method. It was actually developed by a man called Carl Newport, and he created the term productive meditation. I first heard of this method when listening to an interview with Carl Newport, and he is an associate professor at Georgetown University, and he's also the author of 6 productivity books and study skill books. Now, the phrase productive meditation may sound like an oxymoron, and I'm sorry to all you hardcore meditators out there who might find this term slightly blasphemous, but please do not discredit this method just yet. As you may or may not know, the intention behind meditation is to become detached from your thoughts. The purpose of productive meditation is to hone your thoughts in on a creative problem. In this way, both practices are requiring you to take control of your thoughts. Meditation is about focusing on a mantra or your breath. When you are in a meditative state, disruptive thoughts are acknowledged and then released, and the practitioner then returns their focus to their breath or the mantra. Productive meditation is about focusing on a creative problem in order to find a solution. The idea is that when your mind begins to wander, which it will, you then notice the disruption and gently shift your focus back to the creative problem you are trying to solve. Productive meditation is its most effective when done while going for a really long walk, say 60 minutes to 2 hours. The reason why productive meditation is particularly effective is because when you are moving, it is activating parts of your brain that are dormant when you are actually stationary. It was about a month ago that I decided to give productive meditation a go, and this was after listening to the interview with Carl Newport. At the time, I was dealing with a particularly sticky creative problem. If you've been following me for a while, you may know that I started a doctorate at the start of this year, a doctorate in creative writing. Now, this doctorate comprises of 2 components. There's a creative work, in my case, a novel that I need to write, and an accompanying exegesis, which is very similar to a thesis. Now, my research project for this doctorate covers multiple areas of study, including, but not limited to, ecofeminism, anthropogenic fiction, the trickster archetype, and human-animal relations. So, as you can imagine, these are pretty big, diverse areas of study, and the problem was I was really struggling to pull all these different areas into one cohesive narrative. Now, my novel doesn't have to explicitly contain all of the research that I have done, but I was really unsatisfied with the book as it currently stood. Basically, I knew I could do better, so I decided to follow Carl Newport's advice. To be clear, Productive meditation is not as easy as it sounds. You are not simply thinking and walking. No. In order to get the most out of this practice, you really have to push yourself to think harder and to actively look for new connections and possibilities and solutions. There is absolutely no point in going for a walk and just lazily recycling through all the information that you know and only looking at the solutions you've already come up with. Like, that's not good enough. You really need to push yourself to try and find a new solution. Look for new possibilities. Forget everything you've done and really try and create from a new clean space. Now, to be clear, this exercise is not about exercise. You don't need to go for a big power walk. In fact, a gentle stroll or amble along the path may be a heck of a lot better because you're trying to focus your attention on the problem at hand. You don't need to be distracted with any sort of physical discomfort because you're pushing yourself to walk faster. Your thoughts need to be turned inwards during this time, not outwards. That being said, creative ideation is heightened, again, when you're walking in nature as opposed to an urban setting or even your office's stairwell. I'm sorry, but you're not going to find much inspiration in the stairwell. It's also a really good idea to take a notepad and a pen with you. That way you can write down any of the ideas that come to you while you're out on your walk. My first productive meditation session went for about 2 hours. And to be totally transparent, the first 20 or 30 minutes were hell. Here's a snapshot of just some of the thoughts I had during this time. You don't have time for this. You should be at your desk reading that journal article or writing the next chapter or editing the last chapter that you wrote or replying to that email, blah, blah, blah. This is stupid. Screw you, Carl Newport. This isn't working. This isn't going to work. I can't find a solution because there is no solution to find. I've painted myself into a corner. I've totally screwed up this research project. What the heck was I thinking? Now, to be even more transparent, I was also kind of terrified that I might find a solution. Let me elaborate. The reason I was resisting this exercise or resisting finding a solution is because I was afraid that if I did come up with a solution, that would mean scrapping the entire manuscript and starting again. This is an unwelcomed thought for any writer. I mean, the idea of throwing a 60,000 word draft in the bin was, pretty shit. Despite having these thoughts, I was determined to stick with this exercise. Mostly because Carl Newport's anecdotes were actually pretty impressive. Now, I have to be honest, that first 20 to 30 minutes was a real struggle, not only because I felt like it was a waste of time, but because I really couldn't see any new connections forming. I could feel myself just recycling through all of the same information. My thoughts were alternating between all the research I've done over the past 6 months and the novel's current premise. I was just recycling and repeating all of the same information over and over again. And yet, I could sense that there were connections there to be made, but I just couldn't articulate them yet. To use a metaphor, if these connections were a school of fish, then I was standing on the pier without a fishing line and with no bait. Anyway, I kept walking and I kept thinking. It was hard, it was slow, and it was painful, but the connections between the research and the manuscript did start to become clearer. The fish swam closer to the surface of the lake. After about an hour, something finally shifted. There was a click. If there is one thing I learned from this exercise, it is this. You must stick with the method until you experience that first shift, until your mind unblocks just that little bit. You just need that little wiggle, and then everything starts to, well, it's not a flood. Let's just say it's a gentle trickle. A gentle trickle of new ideas start to come through. So I continued my walk. I pushed harder against the boundaries of my limited thinking. I actively sought out new solutions. I stopped every 10 minutes and I wrote down whatever it was that had occurred to me. Now, this may all sound a little vague, so I will give you some of the specific questions I was asking myself in order to really challenge myself. Some of those questions were, how can this research be turned into a novel? How else might this research be turned into a novel? Now here is a really good tip. Never ever take your first response. Always push yourself to come up with multiple responses to every question. When you push yourself to dig deeper, that's when you get the gold. Other questions I asked myself was, what do I really want this novel to be about? How do I want people to feel when they read the novel? How big of a scale do I want the novel to have? A big cast, a little cast, a long period of time, a short period of time? And what do I want the voice, the style, or the mood of the novel to be like? Do I want it to be warm, literary, moody, or eerie? These were the general questions that led to, eventually, really big realizations. These questions helped prompt some really juicy answers, and after that, I was able to drill down on the structure of the manuscript itself. About 90 minutes of walking passed, and I was able to continue to come up with new ideas and solutions by asking myself more questions and coming up with more responses. Eventually, I clarified the connections between the research and the novel enough that I could sit down and do a new outline for the novel. Now, to be clear, this outline was really broad and it only covered about 2 A4 pages, so please don't think that I sat down and wrote a detailed outline. It was more the general arc of the story. So what's the takeaway here? Productive meditation is a very effective tool that can add great value to your creative practice. My project benefited tremendously from this practice. Feather flying there. In fact, my project benefited so much that I've decided to include this practice as part of my creative practice by going for a walk every single week to work through creative problems or research problems. If you choose to exercise this method, then I urge you to fully commit to the practice. Push yourself to break out of your cyclic thinking. You need to challenge yourself to find new solutions. Don't be lazy, there's no point in that. And please stick with the allotted time period. You need at least an hour, if not 2 hours, in order to really get the thought processes going. If you do decide to give this method a whirl, I would love for you to please come back and leave a comment or to send me an email. I'd love to hear about how this practice helped your novel. There you have it, guys. Those are my thoughts on Cal Newport's process of productive meditation. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up or subscribe. The button is below. Know that you can always check me out on social media. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I also have a website, taraeast.com, where I post weekly writing advice blogs. If you subscribe to my weekly email newsletter, you'll also get access to my Writers Kickstarter Pack, how to start a blog and get published. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.